Los Angeles, I'm and most Hollywood nights. She goes to California, oh, California.
What you say about Los Angeles?
LA got the people saying,
You're listening to Corner of the Galaxy on cornerofthegalaxy.com. It's time for another episode of Corner of the Galaxy from the Box, the show that gets you behind the scenes of the LA Galaxy and into the minds of soccer reporters and MLS experts. Your hosts for the day are Corner of the Galaxy's Josh Guesman and LA Times soccer reporter Kevin Baxter. Let's start the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Corner of the Galaxy on cornerofthegalaxy.com. I'm your host, Josh Guesman, coming to you on a Monday, April 3rd. LA Galaxy get a 2-1 loss against Seattle Sounders at home. Now losers of 2 out of their first 5, winless in their 5. LA Galaxy struggling a little bit, but I mean, I guess you're here for rainbows and sunshine because that's what I see. There's a lot of positives, still some negatives we can take away, but we can talk about it, figure it out a little bit as the LA Galaxy get ready to head to Houston this next weekend. So some things to talk about. Douglas Costa makes his way back. Efrain Alvarez doesn't make his way off the bench. The broken finger gate. We're going to talk about all that fun stuff and get you to it. The Panda, he's in Uganda. I know I didn't tell you that before, but I figured I could tell you that now because he's actually on his way back from Uganda. It's about 24 hours, 26 hours in terms of travel time. So I don't think I'll be talking to him tomorrow, but perhaps the next day. So we'll have Panda back on here whenever he comes back. So that's probably next Monday is the first time that we will be able to talk a little bit with the Panda and see how he's doing. And we can certainly ask him about his trip to Uganda. He was there on assignment. It was a baseball story, but it's still always interesting to have Kevin talk about all those things. To help me out here, coming up in just a couple minutes, we're going to be joined by Christian Miles. So Christian will talk, and I think Christian's even like on vacation. And he somehow convinced his wife that he was able to talk to us for 20, 30 minutes or something like that. So a very interesting time for the LA Galaxy. Again, winless in 5. It's been a little while since the LA Galaxy have been winless in 5. In fact, did not do it all of last year. So they've actually topped their last year's winless streak. Longest last year was 4. I hope everybody was doing well. I hope everybody sort of enjoyed a little 4:30, I should say almost 5 p.m. kickoff for the LA Galaxy and the Seattle Sounders. And a really interesting game. As far as I'm concerned, the most entertaining game I've watched the LA Galaxy play in a little while, certainly this year. Some really strong performances from some people. There's some guys who really seem to be coming into their own. I know lots of people say the Galaxy didn't play well in the first half. Actually, I thought they played very well in the first half. I'm not saying that they were as offensively good as they were in the second half, and certainly when you're down 2 goals, you tend to push forward a little more, throw a little more caution to the wind. But outside of, and Greg Vanney fact-checked this one whenever we were actually talking to him after the game, he goes, they had one chance. And that was the one that was pretty early on that Calegari got caught up and that Cáceres got caught up into that, sort of left Jalen Neal there. Vanney talked about Jalen Neal. Jalen Neal, I thought, had a good game. So we're going to talk about all that as soon as we get Christian Miles on here. I'm not as down as thing. I will say this, though. If the Galaxy don't get somebody who can finish, looking at Dejan Joveljic, who basically didn't create any chances, really did nothing in that first half, started to open up in the second half, but that was mostly, I think, because of Preston Judd being in there and Judd's more directness, his ability to run in behind, his ability to find things. Some interesting comments from Greg Vanney afterwards about Preston Judd, too, that could possibly see maybe the Galaxy going into a 3-5-2. And if the Galaxy go into a 3-5-2, who are the 2 up top? If you're guessing for me right now, I'm telling you that I don't find that it's going to be Dejan Joveljic playing in a 2 with Chicharito. Greg seems to think that Preston is a different cat whenever it comes to those things. So we're certainly going to see how that all sort of settles around and how that sort of, puts itself out. We had the Bond injury, obviously, and then we had the Jonathan Klinsmann injury as well. So, you look at this and you're sort of like, okay, wasn't great, and you don't like the loss. Individual mistakes on the defensive side of things. A couple individuals at the same time, it seems in some of those cases. And that's where you put yourself. The bottom line is the Galaxy are playing, and Greg Vanney used the same thing. He called margins, right? The Galaxy are sort of playing on these margins. It's very, and I think we've talked about this on the show many times before. So I don't want to get, too into it, but it is, what's the difference between a winning team and a losing team? How many percentage points is it? Is it 2%? Is it 5%? If calls go one way versus another day, does that change a game? And we know that in soccer and football in general, that those tiny little things end up costing the LA Galaxy. Greg has an argument sort of saying that perhaps, and I think if I did the correct math correctly, that he thinks that maybe perhaps they should have had as many as 7 points that they've lost out on so far earlier in this year. I think that's really interesting. Just sort of his take and on how things are sort of working there, and where he sees those points being won and points being lost. And obviously we had a very animated Greg Vanney after the game, so we can talk about that as well. But before we do that, let's welcome a man. Let's see if we can check in. Somehow he convinced his wife that even though they are somewhere other than home and probably enjoying some quiet time, that you somehow figured out that talking to me was a great idea, Christian. Did I get that story right?
It's the honeymoon of my honeymoon, Josh, talking to you from to the corner of the Galaxy. So yes, I finagled my way into a closet in our Airbnb in Oceanside, California. So here I am. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Dude, we are so glad that you could join us. I've been trying to catch up with you. I've been trying to do all this stuff, and I think we've tried a couple times and it just didn't work out, which is what happens sometimes. Can I tell you about my exciting thing that happened to me today?
Please do, because I don't have anything to tell you.
I have in my mailbox today. I may have ordered some Jalen Neal first game tops cards. So I have I have 5 of those sitting here. Now I am going to give these out. Right, I ordered these to give these away. But I also may have just ordered the 5 of the Jalen Neal scores his first MLS goal cards as well. So I think I'm going to put those together in a package, and you're going to win both of those cards. And perhaps if we get lucky, I might be able to get him over to the Galaxy and have him sign those, so that way we can hand those out. Because as far as I'm concerned, this is probably one of the most exciting things that's happening for the Galaxy right now is Jalen Neal.
Oh, well, first of all, I'd like to add onto that package and get the MLS Mom of the Year T-shirt to Sarah Neal, Jalen's mom, who is just fantastic and just a great individual and such, part of such a great family, and supports her son as best as any mother could. So just so happy for them to watch Jalen. I've watched him since his young days at LA Galaxy too, and talking to Junior Gonzalez, the old LA Galaxy 2 coach, said, hey, this is a kid that I can see, going overseas at some point. And I was like, yeah. Then you watch him play, you see it develop, and then just like you said, we saw it Saturday night. To see him score that goal, it's great, and it's befitting of him. It's deserved, and more power to him. So congratulations to them. And yeah, I want one of those cards, by the way. I have to get one of those.
You need to get out in there and order them. They're limited time. They're only available for 10 days or something like that. It's real quick. It's weird how cards are so different than I think whenever I was a kid, probably when you were too, that you'd have to buy them in a pack. You didn't know which cards you were getting. There was all sorts of these rules. And now you can just order the ones you want, but they're only available for 10 days, and then they print them, and then they're done. Is that what we see?
I know, it's off an app too, probably. Back in the day for me, it was you cut it out at the bottom of a comic book for 10 cents and mail it in and get it back 6 weeks later. Hopefully that someone hasn't pilfered through it. So yeah, times have changed, but yeah, it's great. It's crazy they still have the cards around too, because I remember the old days of the Panini stamps for the soccer players,
right?
And the old trading cards for the baseball players and such. It's cool to see that old school tradition continue, and it's so great to see Jalen, a part of that.
Yeah, it's fun. Jalen's a good kid too. Talk to us a little bit afterwards. So always fun. We'll talk about Jalen, I'm sure, here in a little bit. Galaxy lose Christian 2-1. I sort of led this show off by saying it was the most entertaining Galaxy game I've watched this year by far. I thought that there was a lot of chess sort of being played here. You knew Seattle. I was interested to see, Christian, how Seattle would morph their style, right? Because we know that when Seattle's at home, they're a possession-based team. They like to run through the middle, right? They love to use Jordan Morris, and they love to control possession, and they do all those things that really the Galaxy like to do. But Seattle on the road is a little bit of a different animal, which is it's smash and grab Seattle. Sit back, smash and grab, and the Galaxy get caught out twice in, that first half within, some minutes of each other. It feels like there was a lot there for the Galaxy to grab, and they come away with nothing.
Yeah, I mean, and you have to say they kind of, tip of the hat to Brian Schmetzer, because I think he might have outwitted Greg Vanney in this instance. And the fact that everybody knows that the Galaxy are vulnerable in transition and they do get caught out. And it's exactly what happened. You look back at this game, and on the balance, the Galaxy, for me, clearly the better team. I mean, in between the boxes, they were great, but the goals are too easy to concede, as Greg Vanney alluded to in his press conference. The transition moments were the moments that counted. And all credit to Brian Schmetzer, who, they do play possession, but it's also a team that's been forced to sit back a little bit with all of the international call-ups and injuries and such, that they've adapted to that game well. And it revealed itself in the prior game in that 4-1 comeback win against Sporting Kansas City. And then putting Jordan Morris at the 9 and Leo Chu, who is a revelation on the left-hand side, who I thought was going to be the game changer, and he played a role in both goals and had his sound impact on it. So credit to Brian Schmetzer, who he made the adjustments and recognizes what he does is he recognizes the strength of his team and can set up his team based upon what he's got available. And he really had to do some major adjustments without 4 or 5 first-team players, half of his first team out, in essence, and putting Jordan Morris at the 9, keeping Jordan Morris at the 9 when Rui Diaz was available for selection back from international duty, and he held faith, as well he should have. I mean, you can't sit a player down and play him out of position from the position that he scored, a natural hat trick +1. And what can you say about Leo Chu? I mean, my goodness, he's now becoming the player that they anticipated. And, he kind of had Lucas Calegari for lunch in large stretches in those moments of transition, I should say. So I'd have to say, tip of the hat to Brian Schmetzer, who's once again did what he had to do against a Galaxy side that was caught wanting in those key moments.
Yeah. By the way, everybody should go back to whenever Brian Schmetzer took over for Seattle, and some genius on this podcast said, "Nope, I don't see it." I think that's a downgrade. Brian Schmetzer, by the way, getting his 100th win, I believe, over the 100th league win whenever they beat the LA Galaxy, and he's the fastest to do that. So really, really interesting. And I always like the matchups between the Galaxy and the Sounders, but there's some history here as well, which is that the Sounders are now the first team in Major League Soccer to ever go basically undefeated in 10 results versus the LA Galaxy. The LA Galaxy have not beaten the Seattle Sounders in 10 games. And this was the first time that any team has done that. One, tells me two things. One, the fall from grace. I remember in 2000, basically 2009 and on, all the way through the 3 MLS Cups, that the LA Galaxy always found a way to best Seattle, right? It wasn't always, they didn't win every game, Christian, but they won most of the important games whenever it came to it. So, you can go back to some of those playoffs wins. So one is the Galaxy had, a really strong start against Seattle, but two is, one, the fall from grace for the Galaxy, and two, just the consistency and excellence that the Seattle Sounders have sort of put together over the years.
Oh yeah, for me, they're the hallmark franchise. They are the legacy franchise of the last decade. The way this team consistently finds itself, not just in playoff positions, but up until last year, it found itself in the playoffs. Every single year of its existence. Going back to its inception, but people think about this team in a historical context of just from 2009 on. As someone who grew up in the Pacific Northwest, you know very well that Seattle Sounders is an existence and kind of indicative of a tradition and heritage of soccer that goes back to the late 60s, early 70s. Yep. And Brian Schmetzer actually is a part of that. going back to his playing days in the 80s in the NASL and, whatever league you want to put an acronym to, he was a part of and worked his way through it. I love it. Much like we see in NCAA March Madness, when a lot of these coaches are given chances to work their way through the ranks and learn their craft. They're not flash panache appointments. These are guys that have the credentials. They've earned their chops. They've earned the street cred, and they're rewarded for it. And in his case, it's deserved, as you mentioned, the fastest to reach 100 victories. More power to them. They are the hallmark franchise, and they do, in my book, they are the blueprint for what teams need to do in the modern era of MLS, much like our team, the Galaxy, used to be,
right,
in the old days that you were speaking of.
Yeah, you can sort of see it. Real quick on the lineups, Dejan Joveljic got the start up top. It was Tyler Boyd on the left, Ricky Puig, Mark Delgado, and of course Gaston Brugman in the center. Memo Rodriguez playing that inverted right wing, and very inverted whenever Memo plays it. More tucked inside than anything. Delgado usually slips out further wide, and Memo tends to slip in a little bit. Left on the left side, Raheem Edwards on defense, Jalen Neal, Martin Cáceres, and then of course Calegari is in there as well with Jonathan Klinsmann. Now the big deal about Jonathan Klinsmann was we had and let's have a little fun with this one. Alex Ruiz for the striker, and of course I'm Alex's biggest fan. Alex had tweeted out that he had information from a source that basically said that Jonathan Klinsmann has broken his finger, and so there was a signing, and we're going to talk about that signing later in the show, so hold on there. But there was a signing of another goalkeeper coming in. It was kind of almost assumed that there was going to be a question mark of whether or not Jonathan Klinsmann was going to be able to play in this game. I'll tell you that I went to the stadium and was not maybe chided a little bit for following that narrative without sort of, dissecting it and breaking into it. That Jonathan Klinsmann might not be playing, and that's why they got another goalkeeper and all this other stuff. So there was some questioning, and I said, basically on the day that broke, I was very busy at work. Remember, I have a real job. I was very busy at work. So if Alex says it, I'm going to trust Alex, the whole deal. So basically, Klinsmann ends up getting the start. We didn't really get a chance to ask Greg Vanney about Klinsmann because he started. He seemed fine. But Jonathan Klinsmann today tweeted out that this past week, or this was on Instagram, he says, "This past week has been a roller coaster of emotions. Broke my finger in the Portland game and got cleared to play the day before our Seattle game. Super happy I was able to play, and I'm grateful for every chance I get. Looking forward to our next game in Houston." So the bottom line is Alex was indeed correct, and the LA Galaxy were probably wondering who their starting goalkeeper was going to be on the weekend. And so certainly going out and signing a third goalkeeper may have been in reaction to that news. We don't know that for sure. Haven't been able to talk to Greg about it, and I think media availability is probably going to be on Wednesday. So Wednesday or Thursday. So knowing that, I'll say, one, Alex got it right. And two, that's a really interesting thing that's sort of happening here. You have a starting goalkeeper that's playing with a broken finger. By the way, props to Jonathan Klinsmann for going out there as a goalkeeper and playing with a broken digit.
Absolutely. And showing the athleticism and desire. I mean, a guy you guys talked about with Alex, and you talked about in previous podcasts, who, is uttering 4-letter words to himself on the drive to Dignity Health Sports Park because he's saying it's just, S blank IT, driving to the stadium knowing that he's not going to play and he's not going to sit back and finally waiting after about almost 2 years to get a good run out and a first team chance. He's not going to relinquish that lightly. And
right.
All credit to him for, taking the reins and in that situation. It was a pinky finger, I believe, on his left hand.
Yeah, I think it might have been. Yeah, I think that's what it was. And if you go back and watch that Portland game, you can see when it happens because he apparently is grabbing that finger in that hand. So.
Yeah, and credit to him. I mean, it's funny. Listen to his father, Jurgen, talk about him. He's like, ever since he was a young boy, he wanted to play basketball. He wanted to roll around on the ground and get dirty and, get around and hustle it. And you can see it in his game. I love the athleticism of him as a keeper. I think he's better with his feet than Jonathan Bond is. Right. And you were also mentioning the fact when you signed the young Serbian keeper, Mitrovic, it also kind of makes you think, hey, maybe this injury to Jonathan Bond is not what it seems. It could be a little bit longer than anticipated. And with that being the case, the signing of Aaron Cervantes was an emergency signing.
Right.
Is that the long-term situation? Probably not. And that might have hastened the Galaxy's decision to make the signing on loan of the Serbian to provide a little backup for Jonathan Klinsmann, who may be that number one a little bit longer than the couple of weeks, maybe 3 to 4 that we anticipated. Who knows? And for me, I'm a big believer in competition for spots, regardless, and a goalkeeper all the way up to the number 9. And the more, the better. And if you've got quality in there, quality begets quality. So I think that makes that position stronger, whoever is in there. And right now, it's Klinsmann's job to lose.
Yeah, it really interesting. If you want my, I have. Let's say I've talked to some people about Jonathan Bond injury. I'll just say that right now I feel like it's going to be longer rather than shorter. Right, there was no timetables given, but it was one of those where you sort of sit there and say, it feels like the way people are talking, this is not going to be, 2 to 4 weeks, but you have to remember Greg Vanney is usually very, very not opaque, but he says 2 to 4 weeks, but that's 2 to 4 weeks until you're able to come back and start training. And then that's usually, a week or two after that you're actually able to be fully in training and ready for games. So it looks like, for me, I'm saying Jonathan Bond sometimes we say sooner rather than later. I'm going to say later rather than sooner right now. So again, I think it's not unfair to speculate that the length of Bond's injury plus the injury to Klinsmann makes the LA Galaxy nervous enough to pull the trigger on the third goalkeeper, even if it is an international, and we'll get into some of that stuff here a little bit. So, somebody was also asking, by the way, Tim gave us a $5 super chat, says, thank you for that, Tim. Appreciate it. He says, any update on Chicha? Do you think he's playing Saturday? Thanks, Josh. So again, nothing official, and you won't get anything official probably till Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever Greg Vanney talks. From what we were sort of feeling and indicating is maybe not this weekend, maybe the weekend after. And of course, the weekend after would be the LAFC game at Dignity Hill Sports Park. So that seems like more of a lock that he'll be back for LAFC than possibly Houston, right? So that's where we're at. I wanted to get to the game and focus a little bit on. Obviously, you have the 2 goals that are conceded in the first half, and you don't like those because if you look back last year, that's a lot of the same thing, right? Which is individual moments, Christian, where guys are out of position. And in this particular case, the first goal, Calegari gets caught up the field. He gets suckered in by Leo Chu, right? He gets pulled into that offensive zone, and then Chu runs in and back behind him, and Calegari can't keep up with that. The compounding factor to that is that Caceres has stepped up, and whether he was stepping up to take away a pass into the center that he thought was coming, but however that happens, he becomes disconnected with Jalen Neal. Greg Vanney said afterwards, Christian, he said, if I'm being hypercritical about Jalen, I need him to step up with Caceres whenever he goes because you want to keep that connectedness. But in Jalen's defense, if I'm playing center back and I am not a good center back, but that's the position I played, I'm looking at the play developing saying there's about to be 2 guys on a break running at me. I'm dropping because otherwise there's nothing else to save me. You can take the risk and step up and hope that Edwards also steps with you at the same time. But I think he felt that pressure coming that direction and saw it come from a little bit. And that was one of those. That's how I read it. And I understand Greg being critical on that. I think Jalen's okay with that as well. But that's the compounding factors for me.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting? And I'm glad you brought this up, Josh, because this is at the crux of the essence of that position where you have to be intelligent enough, experienced enough, and in connection with your defender, your partner, to make those decisions, when to step, when to drop. And the default mechanism is exactly as you said, and exactly as Jalen should have done. He dropped. Now, Caceres was stepping forward to play the trap and trying to play him offside, but those two end up just a split second, a moment of disconnectedness, and Jalen's left, hung out to dry because Calegari has gone out. And all credit to Nicholas Lodero, who actually was the man who started this. He lured Calegari into possession, got him out of position, and allowed Chu to release and get him behind Calegari. It was a real astute play from the Uruguayan. But in terms of the reaction, it's unfortunate, and I think it's part of a growing pain of a young center back. I don't think you can fault Jalen Neal on this goal whatsoever. He was, thrust into a difficult position with a player that has an edge and pace running at him in a diagonal angle. And with Caceres out of position, he was the lone cover. And, once that is recognized, he has to commit to that and just couldn't get there in time. But those little moments of decision making are the difference between games. Yeah. And we saw it in our game. And that moment where Cáceres and Neal are disconnected. And that's where I take issue where people saying, you want to bring other people in to play them, to get experience at that position. I totally disagree, because what you need is an understanding that only comes from playing together. And Jalen Neal and Martin Cáceres need to spend as much time on that field together. They need to know each other inside out. They need to be able to count the amount of hairs on each other's head. They need to have that understanding almost innately, to have that pattern of play, to understand when to step and be in that, lockstep communication and in the same motions to do that. And that's the key to any successive defensive partnership. I think it's fantastic. I think it's come along. Yes, there was a moment of weakness, and the right back Calegari didn't do them any favors, and I call it a systemic breakdown of the back four entirely in a moment of transition. But you can't fault Jalen Neal for that goal whatsoever.
Yeah, I understand sort of what you mean with that. Really unfortunate. The second one as well. This is the one Greg Vanney says is not really a chance, and you kind of understand it. This is a very slow developing play that comes as a result of a collision, or at least a coming together of feet between Leochu and Calegari. I watched this and I looked back at it and I said, let me take a look at this and see if there's something there that we really need to investigate in terms of pool reporting, whether or not there was a foul. And I watched that play 3 or 4 times, and there's zero chance I can sit there and say, oh yeah, there's a problem. There's no problem there. That was coming together, and Calegari may have even instigated the contact, right? So I'm like, okay, that's fine. Leave that one. The shot, though, is interesting. Does Klinsmann see it? Does he not see it? Because he lays out for it, and it's a far shot. It's 20, 25 yards out.
He's got to do better. And for me, he's got to do better. It's just, and he was caught leaning, as a commentator mentioned, and he just lost his balance. But you can't be beaten like that. Period. My estimation, a keeper of Jonathan Klinsmann's athletic ability should be able to get to that, and he'll be disappointed. You saw it in his reaction, didn't you?
Yeah.
Right after it went in, he knew I thought he knew he should have had that, and it's unfortunate, but it's just too. Moments like that, and that the margins are so fine in this game, and that allowed Seattle to even sit back and bed in a little bit more after getting those 2 goals.
I will say this: you look at how the Galaxy react in the second half, and Greg Vanney pulling strings, doing some things. The 3-5-2 comes in. Preston Judd comes in. I've been really impressed with Preston Judd in terms of his ability to immediately impact games. That's a big thing, because I think that. I think there should be some criticism leveled at Joveljic. I saw it, and I see it in the Discord. I see it on Twitter. They're saying, well, Joveljic isn't getting the service. And I agree up to a certain point, and that point actually is a lot further down than it should have been maybe earlier in the season, where I really felt he wasn't getting service. He's not creating the space for people to find him for service. He's not making those runs in behind. He's not stretching or causing problems for the defense. And because of that, even when he does get the ball, they're easily able to stay with him. The big thing and my big disappointment with him was I thought that he finally got off a shoulder and finally got some space. This was in the first half. Ricky Puig played a ball up and over the top to him. And it's a ball that if it's played to Chicha finds a way to bring that down and get a shot on goal, right? It was one of those because he led them into space. They had a step. That's where you want to see it. And Joveljic had it, skid off the top of his foot. Is that an easy play? No. But if you're a striker, you have to, in those positions, be able to get the ball and get a shot on goal. And for me, Joveljic had some chances, a lot of block shots. I mean, that's the history. For at one point, Damian Calhoun yelled over to me, Christian, and he goes, are there 22 sounders out on the field? Because every time the Galaxy would take a shot, it was blocked, and the Galaxy ended up with 11 block shots on the night. Usually indicates to me whenever you get a block shot is one of 2 things. One, either low block, which, yes, Seattle sort of had that going for him, or 2, that you're forcing some shots because you're not getting clean shots. And you don't always have to get clean shots, but you want to sometimes find those spaces and actually be able to get a shot on goal. Somebody was criticizing as well, Christian, they're saying, the Galaxy shoot a lot at the goalkeeper. Again, indicative for me that you're not taking clean shots, that you're not getting good looks at the goal. You're shooting into windows that are already covered by the goalkeeper because in order to get the ball past the defense, those are your only lanes to sort of do it. So I think there's going to be a lot of criticism sort of put on Dejan Joveljic, and it's going to increase, especially with Greg Vanney's comments afterwards. And the Greg Vanney comments afterwards were sort of like, he's happy in that 3-5-2 whenever it's Judd and Joveljic, because he says Judd is a different type of player than what Joveljic is, right? And this is what we've always been talking about, Christian, whenever it comes to Chicharito and Joveljic. Well, if I'm reading between the lines and Vanney likes the 3-5-2 in this situation, then if they need to go to a 3-5-2 in a game with Chicharito playing, does he put Joveljic in, or is he going to put Judd in? Because the way he spoke, it seemed like Judd might be that guy.
It might be, but also the situation being as such with those 2 goals, kind of made the decision to go 3 at the back pretty much easy for Greg Vanney to go with those 2 strikers, because he really didn't have a choice. It's go for broke. And at the point, I thought they looked great. And you hit the nail on the head with Preston Judd. Again, like we were talking with Jalen Neal, watching him in his youthful days with LA Galaxy too. This is a guy that's going to run channels. He's going to hold up plays. He's going to mix it up. The chance for me, the goal is coming. He's been tremendously unlucky. And I thought the way that he and Joveljic were able to play off of each other was really great. And it kind of speaks to the strength that that's what Joveljic likes to play off of. They both look very comfortable with each other. As far as the argument goes where Joveljic wasn't getting the chances, 100% in the first 2 games. His last 2 appearances, he's had more than ample opportunity. His chances have not been taken for whatever reason. The bottom line, he has not taken them. And, the fault lies with the striker. If you're a striker in this game, you're going to get 2. You're lucky to get 3 chances like that. And they have been quality looks for him. And a credit to Greg Vanney for making those tactical changes. I thought he did a masterful job in terms of managing the tactics of this game and the way it was dictated to him. And the fact that he did go with 2 up top, because we know that's not his strong suit.
Right.
Interesting. What really was interesting to me in looking back on this was the way that Tyler Boyd was. They're almost playing with 2 strikers from the get-go, and Tyler Boyd was more of a central role, tucking in just behind Joveljic. And you could see what the point of emphasis was, hey, let's get someone to play off of Dejan Joveljic. Let's see what we can conjure up, whether it's Joveljic, whether it's a Tyler Boyd. And we saw a variety of half chances that, were not very well taken, and perhaps a little bit of impatience from the Galaxy. But the opportunities were there. And when you saw those 2 strikers working in conjunction and playing off of each other, and those little flicks and the movements, which suits a player like Dejan Joveljic, I thought that it was great. It was great in terms of when it was with Boyd, it was different. In the second half, when it was Judd, who likes to run the channels, and, mix it up, and he provides great hold-up presence. Just an interesting dynamic of 2 similar things happening in very different ways. The ball didn't fall for the Galaxy, but the Galaxy had their chances, and you can't really ask for anything more than that.
Yeah,
the chances have to be taken, and they just were not. I thought they won the game between the boxes, Josh. It's just in the box, they lost the game.
Yeah. Oh, it's in the box. They lost the game. Absolutely, 100%. Patrick, by the way, gave us a $10 super chat. COG, Josh, Christian holding things together. Thank you for that, Patrick. Appreciate it. All you people who are acting like the Galaxy never playing a 3-5-2 with a 2-forward setup obviously don't look at average positions a lot. It was funny. We had this discussion in the Discord a little bit, which was the Galaxy play with 3 in the back all the time because the Galaxy hold possession. The Galaxy attack sort of, let's say, methodically, and call it methodically instead of just slow sometimes. They're methodical in the buildup. They push their outside backs forward. That gets those guys into that offensive zone. Then you get guys like Memo Rodriguez, or you get guys like Tyler Boyd who cut in, invert, and they press up into those spots. And you look at, especially in this formation, I'm looking at average positions. You're 100% right. Tyler Boyd right through the middle. Underneath Dejan Joveljic. You had Memo Rodriguez playing off the right-hand side. It's almost like they had 3 forwards up there with how far advanced Calegari was on the right-hand side. And again, got him in trouble, but also he fed in a lot of really good balls. Going to a more defined 3-5-2 with 2 actual strikers is certainly something that we have seen Vanney implement last year. We've seen him implement at different times throughout sort of his tenure as a head coach, going to it as early as he did with quote unquote the defined strikers, right? That you're with Preston Judd and Dejan Joveljic, you have 2 strikers there. It's not a midfielder playing a different role, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. I mean, also too, what I really didn't, it's almost like a plus with a minus, because what I didn't like with the setup is I thought that Ricky Puig looked very lost in the setup with Boyd reverting centrally, and it almost looked and seemed as if it eliminated the link of Puig's ability to link to the front with Tyler Boyd drifting centrally and allow Puig to be, he was drifting deeper, and I thought he was kind of played out of the game, whether that be the overloads in midfield, whatever you want to get down to the tactical adjustments. But Ricky Puig is not Ricky Puig in this game. He largely changes shape. Right. When you're in possession and when you're out of possession, most teams drop into a 3 in the modern days. Possession teams drop into a 3 in the back, and the shapes changes based upon position and based upon possession and where you're at. But there was a significant difference in the setup this time. I liked what I saw. I think the Galaxy have been the better team in the last 2 games, Josh.
Yeah, they have been.
Really had to say that. It hasn't been anything to write home about, and I'm not singing their praises from the rooftops and saying, they're the best thing since sliced bread, blah, blah, blah. But same point, and on the balance of these 180 minutes in the last 2 moments, they have not been the better team, and it's shown, and that's where the result kind of yields the truth. But yeah, it's an interesting setup here that has eliminated Efrain Alvarez from first team. When we look at the Galaxy, Josh, we look at this team with a philosophy and the framework that when you were talking on the outside side, and it creates better angles. We see it on corner kicks as well. And it's revealed itself, and it has revealed chances. I just don't think it's come together in terms of it. I think really where you're going to judge this team is probably around after the MLS or the Leagues Cup is back, about 3 or 4.
Be interesting to see, because the bottom line is I still expect at least one more to be the case. But I mean, that's it keeps this. Efrain Alvarez going to the bench is a huge deal, just because when they need a goal, right? Efrain Alvarez, they're like, hey, we need a goal. Let's get Efrain on there. He wanted them to play a little more, but he understands that why he was tentative. And sort of going through that. So they need Douglas Costa to play games. And that's same goes for Chicharito. Plays like a very dynamic sort of player. And it's sort of, you're sitting there going, okay, see him creating chances. You could see him opening space even against a bunker, that guy. He's got to prove it. So it was nice to see him back. Now you need to see
player and profile. And I'm not in no ways comparing to do revert and change the angle and credit. And let's just be honest, he hasn't come to fruition, and that's the reality of the situation, the quality of the player that you've got to play with. And I think they've utilized him. It's hard to put this into words. I don't think Douglas Costa really kind of forward that the Galaxy are looking for on the front foot sometimes, but he does. This close to calling him a bust. I thought we saw that in glimpses. Also from set pieces, he brings an element. I think the Galaxy, in terms of set pieces too, for me, a reticence of attacking the ball on set pieces, which, and I'm not doing this to be vindictive or pick the team apart. I just something I've noticed that the first to win headers, the center backs win headers inside the penalty area, which is a no-no, and also on the other side, we're not attacking him in the fashion that they should be, but. Yeah, it's so odd, and I look at Tyler Boyd, and he's a player. I love his confidence. I love the way he takes players on. I like the width he provides, and I just get that feeling there's one more piece in the jigsaw that he needs to take, where he's going to be a tremendously influential player.
Waiting for it. I think everybody is.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting. Now, obviously, it'll come down, and if you watch the press conference, which is up on our YouTube page, you saw Greg Vanney a little animated about this. Here's what I'll say. There's a handball. In the late stages of that game, and when I saw it first, and you have to understand during a game, it's really hard for us to watch replays, even in the press booth, because you sort of have to stop watching the game in order to go watch the replay, and then you don't know when they're going to show the replay, because then there's still game going on and a whole bunch of stuff. So there's something there. I didn't get a good look at it until probably after I got back from the game and actually saw some replays on Twitter and some other things, because I was like, that's borderline, just sort of the way I saw it. I was like, it's borderline. The guy's hands are behind his back. What more do you want to do? And then whenever I finally got to look at it, and after hearing Greg Vanney complain about it, right? And by the way, I think rightfully so. He wants to make the argument that basically the Galaxy should have 7 more points than they do. I don't know that he's crazy, except that the Galaxy would have to convert penalty kicks in order for that to happen, even if they were given. And we know sometimes they have trouble doing that, right? But having said that, this is a handball. And there's lots of people who are making excuses for defenders, like defenders don't know about silhouettes and things like that. Here's my non-professional opinion on this, and I think Greg Vanney said it best, and as a defender, you know this, is that you have a silhouette, right? And I'm going to be the first to tell you that sometimes defenders get penalized for completely natural hand positions, including your hands out away from your body, because that's how you keep your balance when you're running and trying to shift directions and do a whole bunch of things. But it would be really hard to adjudicate that if you didn't make and draw a line somewhere. So those type of things. But here's the thing is, just because you put your hands behind your back doesn't mean that you can't be guilty of a handball. And I think everybody suddenly assumes, well, that's what they tell defenders to do. No, what they tell defenders is to put your arms to your side, so that way you're not increasing your silhouette. If you have a normal silhouette of you standing with your arms sort of at your side in a relaxed position, anything that goes outside that silhouette, regardless of if your hands are behind you or not, is likely to be a handball. And in this particular case, you have a chicken wing. All right? Nuhu could have very easily put his hands lower on his back, Christian, which would have made his silhouette conform with basically that inline silhouette, right? And that's what they're asking players to do whenever they put their hands behind their back, is to make that silhouette slim and to get your hands out of the way, right? And it's the difference between putting your hands basically at your belt on your back and then moving your hands up into the center of your back and watching how you all of a sudden grow wings. And that's what Nuhu did. He grew wings, Christian. He grew wings in order to make himself bigger. Did he do it on purpose? I don't think so. That type of thing.
That's not the point.
That's not the point, is that he makes his body bigger. And he seems to move towards it. Some people are saying, well, he was trying to stop the ball with his foot. That's fine. Don't care. Can't make your body bigger in order to stop things.
Doesn't matter. Did he make himself bigger? Regardless of his intention, regardless of the affair, the proximity, you have to look, and fairness is not read into this.
Yeah.
This is an interpretation of the law of the game as it is written. Does he make himself bigger? Well, in my estimation, he did.
Yep.
I know it caused quite a stir on social media. I feel like I put Alka-Seltzer into the Chiclets crock pot where everything exploded into sulfuric acid craziness. But look at the daylight between the inside elbow joint and his torso.
Yeah.
That is not in line with the silhouette. No. And that's why I empathize with Greg Vanney, and I sympathize with him because he's absolutely 100% spot on. That is a handball every day of the week.
Yeah,
and this knows anything about the game.
And this goes on top of this is on top of others. Right now, he's going to call the Joveljic one, which was called a handball. And I said this whenever I saw it. How does a referee call a handball from 20 yards away? There's still people arguing. By the way, people will show that video and they'll be like, "Well, it hit his bicep." And I'm like, that camera angle is in a much better position than the referee was, and it's still behind him. There's zero chance you know whether or not it hit his bicep or not. It very easily could have come off his chest. Right? And the ball,
And to your point, he should not have made that call being in that position in that first place in that particular instance. Let it go to VAR and let them adjudicate from there. Yeah,
I'll say this. So that's the argument for that one, which is don't blow the whistle because you have no idea whether or not that's a handball. Chapman got that right. I will say that 100%. He did not blow the whistle and he did not call for a handball. I don't know that he's in a position to see the wing stick out. Right? But VAR needs to come in there. Now, there's going to be people argue that say, well, it's so subjective about whether or not there's a chicken wing or not, which, by the way, I looked at it for 2 seconds after I finally got a good look at it. I'm like, oh, yeah, handball. That one.
Absolutely.
So for me, VAR blew this call. That's not Chapman's fault. Chapman doesn't have to. In my opinion, Chapman shouldn't blow that whistle. Not in that situation. Let's wait because I don't think he's in a position to see the wing sort of stick out there. So then you go into the other handball. Now remember, there's 3. Greg Vanney mentioned 3, and I know which one he's talking about. There was one in the Portland game. This one is a cross coming in from the left-hand side. The Portland defender basically has it hit his hand as he's going by. That one is more subjective to me only because I felt like the arm is in a pretty natural position whenever it goes, except that it kind of, the ball at least drags the arm away from the body a little bit. And that, it's like, that one's more borderline. That's the most borderline call of them. And that one probably hit the hand the hardest out of all of them. And that's the borderline call for me. The other ones are pretty clear and obvious. So Vanney says, I'm going to get fined, right? And he knew what he was doing. Listen, there's 2 things that are happening here. All right. One is, he wants to tell Pro and MLS that they're screwing with him, right? And so we know that. We know that that's one of the main things, and he knows he's getting fined going into it. So he's not going to be shocked and surprised whenever the notice comes in and the disciplinary committee is going to be like, you owe us money, right? That type of thing. Not a surprise. Mm-hmm. The other thing he's doing is he's telling his guys he's got their back. He even says, I'm fighting for my guys. Players aren't allowed really to do this as much as coaches are. Coaches are in a position of safety, knowing that they can sort of go and yell at the referees from this. It's really interesting to me, Christian. I've never heard anybody take shots at the fourth official as well, but Vanney went in at the fourth official in this press conference as well. And because Damian asked right after that, he goes, did the fourth official tell you anything about it? And he goes, no, the fourth official, he goes, I don't even think I saw that guy all night. I think he was sitting on the Seattle Sounders bench, right? And I was cracking up. I'm like, dude, this is great. But people are saying that the pressure is getting to Greg Vanney and that's why he's doing this.
Nah.
This is Greg Vanney. And I know he's been on his best behavior for the first 2 years, but this dude is a fired up competitor. He screams, he yells. I'm pretty sure he cusses, right? Like there's all this stuff that goes on. You've heard sort of some of the behind the scenes where he gets all fired up in a positive way. What they probably don't show you him getting fired up in a negative way. If you were at the game, Christian, you would be able to hear Greg Vanney yelling and screaming at Raheem Edwards for most of the night. I could hear it in the stadium. One, because with no supporters groups there, the plays that are in between anything exciting, the in-between time is very quiet. You can hear almost anything you want to hear on the field whenever it comes. And you could hear Vanney screaming at Raheem Edwards. I think Raheem was praying to God that halftime came so he could go on the other side of the field. So... Yeah.
It's a really I love what he has done because one, I think it's whether it's intended or not, it's a great piece of man management,
right?
Because he has galvanized belief with his boys. Hey, I'm here. I am advocating for you too. It's also, hey, is it a piece of deflection where we take away from our team's shortcomings and we cast the focus on these handballs? Which justifiably so, he is absolutely correct in assessing, and whether you want to, I don't know if you can translate that into sheer amount of points, whatever, but point being, yes, he is absolutely correct to bring those into question, into light, and it eliminates some of the pressure for the team's shortcomings to being in these situations in the first place, because you can't sit here, in contrast to what he's saying, you can't sit there and say, the team is in this situation solely because of those decisions, because that's not the case. Because quite simply, you and I, we've seen what the Galaxy put out there, and it's not good enough right now. It's okay that it's not good enough. That's where it is. But to put that down as an excuse for where they are right now, no, that's incorrect. But he is completely correct in what he's saying. I love what he's doing because any manager worth his salt, and Greg Vanney knows this as a player, and you see this a lot from managers that were players. The man management aspect of this game is something that is really difficult. Kevin talks about it in terms of the mental side of the game.
Right.
And this is it right here, whether it was intended or not. Right now, he has got every single one of those players behind him. And to have that is absolutely, cash in the bank. And it's great for him, and he is advocating because that's what a player wants. They want him to believe, regardless of your form and how terrible you're playing or how great you're playing. And I'm not trying to deflect or sugarcoat anything and excuse it. And he has every right to be angry about this. But the point is that it is a justifiable point, but also don't let it serve as a smoke screen as to what the Galaxy need to focus on, because there are plenty of issues that this team has at this point right now that need to be dealt with. And it's not, handballs are not at the top of that list.
Yeah, I will say this, that everybody will make a big deal about the Greg Vanney flying off the handle. And by the way, great demonstrations in the press room. We never get like live action demonstrations in the press room.
Hands on the hips.
Yeah, hands on the hips. He had the hands on the hips. He put his hands down to his side. This is a handball. This is not a handball. This is the silhouette. I'm like, wow, this is very educational for me right now.
Josh, can we talk about this handball though?
Yeah.
To me, I really, I've taken a lot of hate, a lot of heat on social media for this. If you look at this handball, and even Sophie and I were debating this, and she says it's not, and I say it is, and I love Sophie to death. I'm her biggest fan. We stand at odds on this, but How you can look at that and say he did not intentionally make himself bigger, to me, is beyond me.
Yeah.
It's beyond me, because the very definition of the silhouette, and that is what Greg Vanney is absolutely correct with in his assessment, I agree with.
Right.
Maybe I'm seeing it wrong.
Right.
As I interpret the law, and you hit it on the head. There's a massive difference between putting your arms behind your back. That does not absolve you from any ball making contact with your body. It is not mutually exclusive to have your hands behind your back, making yourself absolutely guilt-free of a handball. You can still be guilty of a handball with your hands behind your back. You can still make yourself bigger with your hands behind your back. It is absolutely physically possible.
Yes.
So the nonsense I feel it's being peddled by these people are saying, oh, it's ball to hand. Ball to hand has nothing to do with it. Intention has nothing to do with it. Was the ball obstructed by the action of the player? That's the criteria. For me, the answer, clearly yes.
Yeah. The only other thing that I'll add, I'm going to let you go here in a second, but I want to talk about pool reporter questions and why there wasn't one asked about this. And I'll tell you what MLS is doing that I think they're doing on purpose, which is basically limiting pool reporter questions. We'll talk about that here in a second. The only other thing I want to talk about is people are going to tell you that the LA Galaxy didn't have any offense on the night, right? Like there was no offense. There was no finishing. There was no finishing on the night. There were 28 shots, 11 blocked, 8 on target. The LA Galaxy had an expected goals, and usually, Christian, whenever we talk about XG, I will sit here and tell you the LA Galaxy really like to chip away at XG. They're like, here's a little one, here's a little one, here's a little one. Not in this case. 2.5 was total XG on the team. There are 3 significant chances that add to that XG. There's Puig in the 26th minute, there's Judd in the 53rd, and Joveljic in the 57th. All of those were some of the bigger chances that they've had, not to mention Jalen Neal's goal on the night as well. So this is not the same as some of those other games. Yes, they had some, whenever you have 28 shots on goal, clearly you're not getting everything through. When you have 11 block shots, you're not getting everything through. You're doing that, but there's still 8 shots on goal. Some of those too easy to save, some of those very good saves. I know lots of people talking about Judd not finishing against Fry on that near post, and he actually apologized to Greg Vanney afterwards. It was funny. Greg told us that, and I asked Judd about it as well. He's like, it's my job to score goals. I need to score goals the whole deal. Yeah. He can say that. If you go watch the replay, watch how quickly Fry shuts that down. That would have been a very difficult goal to score there. Very difficult.
Tip of the hat to Stephen Fry.
Yeah.
By the way, I mean, none of the commentators noticed he was brilliant on that night. He was fantastic. That was a world class. He made great saves. He stood on his head part of this game. And to anybody, whoever these pool reporters are saying that the chances weren't there, watch the game. The chances were there. Look at that first 25 minutes against the Portland Timbers. Arguably the best passage of play the Galaxy have had the entire season.
Yep.
4 first half opportunities. Preston Judd, unlucky, hits the post. That's just in the first half of the Portland game.
Yep.
80 minutes of this game against the Seattle Sounders, they were better. Now, regardless of the fact of why they were better, that's another situation where, Seattle invited the pressure. They were up 2-0. They were on the road. They invited the pressure and, obviously bunkered in and rode out the result. And, quite frankly, very, very lucky to get away with a full share of the points. But for anybody to sit there and tell me and look me in the face and tell me the Galaxy did not have their chances, needs to go back, rewind to the beginning of that Portland game, go back to the Sporting Kansas City game and tell me that there were not chances there, because there have been plenty of chances. The stats will back it up. I'm not an XG guy. I'm not a stat guy. The eyeball test bears the truth of this. There is absolutely no truth in the fact that the Galaxy have not had chances. They have had chances.
Right.
They come in different fashion. They come in different ways, where Ricky Puig was the main conjurer earlier. And it was mainly Tyler Boyd in the first half. The combination of Judd and Joveljic in the second half against Seattle. They were the culprits. There's no way in hell you're going to convince me that the Galaxy did not have their chances. They had their chances. They didn't take them. That's the reality of the situation.
Christian, you're awesome. I said let's talk for 30 minutes, and here you are talking for my timer says 52 minutes. So you're amazing. I should release you back to your wife and your family. I hope you have fun.
She doesn't want you to. She doesn't want you to.
She's like no, he's good. You can keep him. But no, I really appreciate it. Tell people where they can find you and what you're up to right now.
At C Mile Sports, and just kind of moonlighting. Catch my little segment called This Week in the LA Galaxy, where I just kind of blather on and give you my thoughts, totally independent sourced, and really thankful for letting you, for you having me on, Josh. I'm a huge fan Huge fan of you. Huge fan of the podcast in itself. Huge fan of Executive Herb and all the great people in his Galaxy community.
Awesome, buddy. Hey, we appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll talk to you real soon. So go off, have fun, enjoy the family. We'll talk to you soon. All right?
Cheers, Josh.
All right, there he goes, Mr. Christian Miles. I love Christian, by the way, in case you couldn't tell. By the way, a $20 super chat from Scott. Here's some money for the internet fund. Yes, the internet dropped away again. It's a circuit issue. It's congested, and that's why. And so we're trying to figure that out and how to get away from that circuit and try to find a better stream. I don't know how that's going to happen. It's like somebody moved into the neighborhood and started sucking up all the bandwidth besides me. In living color, abroad, $2 super chat. Why does Vanney always make excuses? Everybody drink. You're not allowed to say the word excuses in here anymore. I just want you to listen to what people talk about. All right. Listen to what people talk about. Stop worrying about whether it's an excuse or not, because Greg Vanney also goes in and talks about all the other failings of the Galaxy in his press conference. And I asked him whether or not this team even does it feel like a winless in 5 games? He's like, yeah, of course it does, because we haven't won a game. There you go. All right. So he sees it, he feels it too, but you're not allowed to use excuses anymore. I don't like that word because too many people use it as a crutch. Let me tell you about poll reporter questions. So realistically, we should ask the poll reporter question on that handball or the non-handball at the end. And that's my fault. I was the only poll reporter in the building at the time too. So it was up to me to be the poll reporter. Here's what MLS did. During COVID, they actually let us submit poll reporter questions via email. And we would email the club PR people, and then the club PR people would email Pro, and then Pro would email the referee. And you're like, oh, that sounds really complicated and all that stuff. I mean, I was on an email chain with like Howard Webb and stuff like that. It was kind of fun to see that. But it worked really seamlessly and really quick. And you know what the best part of it was? Is it didn't take time away from me still covering the team. I could give them my email, I could send it off, and then I could go about my way of going into the press conference and talking to Greg Vanney and doing all the things that I'm supposed to do whenever I'm there as a reporter. What they have decided to do was take that back. And the original sort of idea of the pool reporter is that pool reporters would wait outside the referee's locker room, which I've done multiple times. You wait for the referee to come out, you hand them the question, or they get handed the question, they come out and they either want to talk to you and can speak into your microphone, or they'll give you a written response to your stuff, and then you can ask any follow-ups if you need any follow-ups. Understand that means I don't get to go to the press conference, that I don't get to continue doing the job that I need to do. And the email, there was still an ability to ask follow-ups. I love the in-person stuff, mostly because some referees you would talk to, you would get to be like, hey, okay, well, I saw that you said that, but what about this? And like you could get in more questions. A lot of those guys want to be open, and so you're able to ask questions. The bottom line is, though, that they are making a pool reporter basically abandon his other duties whenever you're a reporter. And quite honestly, I need to talk to players. I need to talk to Greg. It's one of my only times I really get to do it because I work other times, so it's important for me to do that. Other reporters are on deadline. I'm actually one of the guys who has like the least amount to do whenever I'm there, which is why I'm a pool reporter, because sometimes I can forego that in the greater good. All right. So this is what I'm going at, is that MLS knows this is a more antiquated process by having to go down there. They know it takes more time, and I imagine they saw an increase in pool reporter questions whenever it was easier. All right, because nobody wants to waste their time to go down there and do that. So I failed you on that, knowing that I had other things to do. But MLS is doing this on purpose, probably so that way they don't get as many pool reporter questions. All right, that's a big charge I think I'm leveling at them, but anybody sort of in their right mind would understand that the email system worked wonderfully. It was streamlined. It was easy. And if it meant more pool reporter questions than tough cookies, it should have happened. I think we sort of covered everything I wanted to cover in the game. I like the way the Galaxy played in the second half. I like Calegari. I like Boyd on the night. I don't know that I love Boyd coming through the middle, but I do like some of the runs that he made through the middle. I need some more from Dejan Joveljic. And he's got to be able to find it. It's not just a service issue. He's not finding spaces where people can find him. And when he does, he's not making the plays. And so you need more from Joveljic. In terms of Chicharito, possibly this weekend, you could see him. Maybe he gets a couple minutes. It still feels, and I was talking to one of the other reporters, Damian Calhoun. Damian was sort of saying he still thinks it's a couple weeks away, and Damian is able to be at training whenever I'm not. All right. So that's sort of where we're at. LA Galaxy winless in 5. What does that mean? Well, I think I already told you winless in 5 means that is their longest streak since 2021 when they went winless in 9. This is single season stuff and not necessarily anything that carries over for it. So keep that in mind as you look there. Another thing I sort of wanted to point out was that Dejan Joveljic made his 50th appearance for the LA Galaxy in this game, right? So again, a significant milestone for him whenever you look at that in terms of his performance, how that's gone. If we looked at DP minutes, this is going to be the major reason why I think the LA Galaxy are winless right now, is that you basically have Javier Hernandez, who has played 0 minutes so far this year. You have Douglas Costa, who's played 12, which is 2.7% of the total available minutes so far. And then you have Riqui Puig, who's played 100%. So overall, if you combine all of them together, they played 34.2% of the total available minutes, and that needs to be a lot better. If we look at the start in terms of LA Galaxy history, you can see that the trend is definitely on the bottom side of the graph. We graph every single season in LA Galaxy history. It sort of gives us this point cloud, and so you can sort of see after 5 games where the LA Galaxy are. It looks like there maybe was one team that was also at 5 points, and in fact, if we go over, was at 3 points through this, we can look at one team, the 2020 team, actually had 2 points in there. 1999 also had 2 points. So basically, if we cancel out 2020, and we have to, because we have to look at that and say that was the tournament year and everything fun that was going on, right? If we look at that, we can say we go all the way back to 1999 is the last time the LA Galaxy had 2 points from 5 games. That's during the shootout era as well. So keep that in mind. Not a great start for the LA Galaxy. Not that I think you're worried. You should be worried. I think it's just disappointing that they are where they are. I think the Galaxy are playing well enough to be above this 3-point sort of marker. So even in 2017, by the way, the wooden spoon year, the LA Galaxy had 6 points the first 5 games. Just saying. Should the LA Galaxy remain winless after going to Houston, it puts them into a spot where only in 1997 did they have 3 points through the first 6 games. All right, so keep that in mind. Again, an away game in Houston is not an easy game to go after. We'll go and look just real quickly at my points per month chart. As you can see, LA Galaxy winless in March, 1 loss, 3 draws, and now winless to start in April. So a loss to start April with 5 games coming up this month. So 4 more games still to play for the LA Galaxy. We've talked about it, and we've told you that the next game that sort of comes out for the LA Galaxy is going to be that LAFC game at home. So it's Houston, then LAFC. So a lot to play for, a lot of things that we go for. All right. I'm trying to see some of the other charts I wanted to pull up. If there's anything else that sort of pops out to me. No, let's call that. I thought some interesting stuff here because there was a lot of snarky comments coming out here. The most common passing connection this MLS season has been the LA Galaxy's Gaston Bergman to Riqui Puig. They have 106, while the second most common has been Puig to Bergman, 96. Don't let this be one of those things where people tell you that they're not doing anything with those passes. The way that these two orbit around each other and play with each other is simply outstanding. As a matter of fact, Seattle is known as having one of the best midfields in Major League Soccer, with Ladero and Rusnak and some Roldans and all those guys that sort of play. Now Leo Chu in there, one of the best. The Galaxy's midfield is a better midfield in terms of what they have with Bergman and Puig, right? So I thought the Galaxy midfield actually played really well in this game. I didn't think that Seattle had any luck playing down that side, so basically it was all coming through the wings for most of the night. So this is a good thing, not a bad thing. It doesn't indicate the LA Galaxy are aimless, like a lot of people want to tell you that they are. The Galaxy are deliberate in their buildups. That's something that is not fun to watch sometimes, but it's indicative of the style that they're playing. Let's go to some other news too. Just 21 days remaining in the MLS primary transfer window. Excuse me, while I cough while I'm by myself. So just 21 days, basically like 20 days now, as we're sort of recording on a Monday night, and probably my calendar's flipped over by now. But 21 days remaining until that MLS window closes. That means basically a little less than 3 weeks the LA Galaxy have to find one more player, maybe 2 more players. So that's something to sort of watch. We talked about Novak Mitrovic. That's how I'm going with it right now. I'm gonna call it that. This is a really interesting one. And I do think that there was at least some concern that the LA Galaxy needed to get a backup goalkeeper who they were interested in, who they think that might have a future with them in the league. So the first thing that sort of kicked things off, and again, this was on Friday, so we recorded on a Thursday. Of course, fun things happen on Friday. The LA Galaxy announced that they had acquired a 2023 international roster slot. This one sort of came out of left field at us. So we didn't know about that. Now, the good news is 75,000 in 2023, 75,000 in 2024. Remember that they also did that with Julian Auda, who should be possibly coming into camp this week as well. So keep your eyes open for that. But they did this with Auda as well, which was they went and they split the jam between 75,000 and 75,000. So Galaxy are basically paying $150,000 this year and $150,000 next year for 2 international slots. The 150 is absolutely the going rate. They didn't pay too much. All right. And so they went out and they got an international goalkeeper. Why would you do that? One, I'm going to tell you why I think that they were able to do this and why it doesn't hurt them. One is they only paid $150,000 for an international slot. That's not a tremendous amount. And two is I think that they have some, excuse me, I think that they have some money left over from Julian Araujo and what they're trying to do there. And so I think that when you look at this is possibly an upgrade. Yes, you could have probably found a domestic player to come in and be your third goalkeeper, but they're going to give this guy a chance. Mitrovic is 21 years old, right? 6'3", 170 pounds. Coming from, he was born in Serbia, playing for a Serbian team. So he comes in. This is a chance for the LA Galaxy to test drive him, to see what he's doing. This is a 1-year loan, basically until the end of the season with a purchase option to buy. I think that any money they have here was sort of a Julian Araujo left over. They have it, and they probably already have the money that they have earmarked under the cap for everything else that they need for the additional player I imagine they're still going out to get. All right, so this is an upgrade that is made possible by somebody like Julian Araujo being sold to a Barcelona. That's my take on it. All right, we haven't had to talk to Greg yet about this, mostly because it wasn't a game thing. I know everybody wants us to ask every question every time, and that's just not possible for us to do. So as far as I'm concerned, they didn't spend a tremendous amount of money. Even if it's $1 million on the loan, it seems like the Galaxy have that and that they were more than willing to spend it, and I don't think it hamstrings them. And this is a rental period. Okay, they get to rent him. This also could mean that Jonathan Klinsmann or Jonathan Bond is on the chopping block. All right, maybe they remember when Jonathan Bond got his contract extension was in the summer of last year, right? Maybe that they're thinking maybe that wasn't a great idea. Not saying that that's what they're saying. I'm just speculating, right? Maybe they're thinking that there's some flexibility there, that they can move Bond somewhere else, that Bond could be sold, that Klinsmann could be sold. All right. So this is where we're sort of at with this. I have no problems with it. Yes, you can spend $300,000, but you're not spending $300,000. See, this is the whole thing. Commercial Underground, you're not spending $300,000. You're spending $150,000 now and $150,000 next year. In cap hit space, in general allocation money space, you're spending $150,000 this year and $150,000 next year. All right. This is probably the best indication, and I know we were talking about this on the Discord. This is probably the best indication that the LA Galaxy have an actual list of goalkeepers, an actual list of players that they're ready to pull the trigger on, that they have had advanced scouting on, that they have looked things. Because if this is a reaction to Jonathan Klinsmann and the broken finger, if this is a reaction to the fact that they thought maybe we're not going to have a competent backup in Major League Soccer, we were able to go out and get this job done and get it done quickly. All right. This is actually, in my mind, this is a healthy sign that the LA Galaxy have a scouting network that is ready and willing to take on sort of the unknown. Now, having said that, you still want to see them put out a winger or find that one last player in these last 3 weeks. So we'll see if that's something they could do. Take a look at the roster while I take this drink of water. There's 28 players now. Galaxy still have room for 2 more. Lots of people are going to tell you the spots 29 and 30 are reserved for homegrown players. They are correct. The Galaxy have plenty of homegrown players they can put in spots 29 and 30, which means that they have open spots in other places. All right. So the Galaxy still probably have a senior roster spot, I'm guessing, because they can always move things around a little bit. So that's where I am sort of looking and saying, based off this, that they have at least room for 1 more, possibly 2 more players. 2 more roster spots for sure. Cap room is another question and certainly something to pay attention to. We look at the schedule coming up. Houston coming up this Saturday, 5:30 p.m. Apple TV, MLS Season Pass, that's where you can find it. Then the LA Galaxy home and hosting LAFC at 1:30 on April 16th. Then they're home hosting Austin on 4/22, 7:30 p.m. game, and then a 4:30 p.m. game over in Orlando to close out April. A busy April, a tough April, as we've mentioned many times before. I want to point out this. Saw this floating around social media as well. A Twitter user at Mr. CHONTE 47. I don't know how to say that. We'll just leave that there. Basically said being a season ticket holder has its perks. Since the jersey launch didn't go as planned, I was gifted an awesome signed jersey from Jonathan Bond, an apology letter from Klein. Basically, the letter, and I was able to zoom in and read it earlier, says, while we enjoyed having you at the season ticket member, we acknowledge that the event was not up to our standards. We had told you that. Anybody who was there would have told you that. Players were supposed to sign autographs. They're supposed to do a thing. It's nice seeing the LA Galaxy do the right thing. This is the right thing. People who were there and were able to, that were sort of in line for some of those autographs and stuff like that are getting signed jerseys from these guys. Bond, and I think there was a Joveljic, and there was other different ones in there that were all around. So getting a Jonathan Bond shirt, not the worst thing in the world whenever it comes to. The Galaxy needed to make that right, though, because that was not a great event. So I'm glad that they fixed that for the people who are in attendance and the season ticket holders who really trusted them to make that event what it was supposed to be. And yeah, we'll see. So we'll see how it all goes and how it all plays out. But that is the correct response to what happened as far as I'm concerned. Let's see, anything else? No, that's it. I mean, listen, the LA Galaxy are third from the bottom of the Supporters Shield. Do you need me to tell you that? No. Am I worried? Not necessarily. Not yet. So I'm really interested to see this Houston game. I think the LA Galaxy are going to be all sorts of fired up for this Houston game. We'll see if Chicharito can play. We'll see how much of an impact Douglas Costa has. Maybe Alda is able to get in. Julian comes in and he's able to play a little left back. Maybe we can start seeing that this week. So there's a lot of things that still have to come together. Again, I think we're waiting for a couple different shoes still to drop. So, waiting for Novak Mitrovic to come in as well and sort of see what that is and how that is. And if this is something that perhaps he plays and he's able to get some time, or if he doesn't play and the LA Galaxy really like him, this could be a guy who stays with the Galaxy for a long time and possibly, and we always say it, it's such a cliche anymore, but possibly one of those guys you develop a little bit and you sell and you're able to make your money off of that, right? The Julian Araujo sale has to have them a little bit pumped up. That's why Efrain and Alvarez could still be on the chopping block, especially come the summer. And you're like, but they can't replace them in the summer. They could possibly replace them domestically, which is something that I know we gloss over a lot. But the Galaxy aren't allowed to make international transfers. You can still make, it seems like they're still going to be able to make those internal transfers. All right. So chicken wings, all that fun stuff that we talked about in this particular game. Galaxy lose 2-1 to Seattle. Redemption game coming up against Houston in Houston. So that should be the chance for the LA Galaxy. Houston, not great. Ben Olsen's coach under there. Yeah, I think Ben Olsen is there. Yeah, that makes it fun. So Ben Olsen, Greg Vanney should be an interesting one to see. But the Houston Dynamo and the LA Galaxy not exactly at the top of any list. Houston not horrible though. I shouldn't just come out here and say, oh well, Houston's this worst team ever in the history of everything. No, they are in 18th place in the Supporters Shield, and the Galaxy are in 27th, right? Houston has 5 points, so they have 2 more points than the LA Galaxy right now. Galaxy could easily have 2 more points. So don't think that there's anything that sort of goes with that tells you that Houston is going to be, one, an easy game or a really difficult game. It's going to be something in between. And we always know that weird things happen whenever they go to Houston or Dallas or anywhere in Texas, all right? All right, that's what we got. LA Galaxy 2-1 losers to Seattle, a redemption game, a turnaround game coming up against Houston. I'm already telling you that I'm going to be way more optimistic about this Houston game than I have about a lot of other games. And if you look at the rest of the schedule coming up this month, this is probably the easiest game, even though it's on the road for the LA Galaxy. All right, big thanks to Christian Miles for stopping by and hanging out with us. His insight is always appreciated. Definitely want to always check out Christian Miles on Twitter. Anywhere else you can find him, he's great at C Miles Sports is where you can find him on Twitter. All right, if you're looking for me, it's at J Guesman, JGUESMAN, and of course at Galaxy Podcast, cornerofthegalaxy.com is where you can find it. And Mr. Kevin Baxter will be back in LATimes.com, at KBaxter11 on Twitter. We'll be able to talk to him next Monday, but we'll have a live show for you coming up on Thursday. Thursday. Don't know who my co-host is, but we'll get you ready for that Houston game. All right, that does it for me. For Kevin, the Panda Baxter, for Mr. Christian Miles, I'm Josh Patrick Guesman. You've been listening. You've been watching to Corner of the Galaxy from the box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. Have a great one, everybody.
You've been listening to the Corner of the Galaxy podcast on cornerofthegalaxy.com. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Galaxy Podcast. And be sure to check out and subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook by searching for Corner of the Galaxy. Fans, we thank you for listening, and we ask that you be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the podcast. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm Michael Araujo, and on behalf of the entire Corner of the Galaxy crew, goodbye, everybody.